Hi, I'm here with Richard Simpson. He's the MD of BulkSMS, and we're going to talk about Omnichannel. So, Richard, thanks for joining us today. BulkSMS is been on a journey that a lot of MEF members have been on. It's there in the title. You started out as a sort of batch and blast SMS company. I'm sure you're still doing that kind of thing. But like a lot of companies, you've evolved into a more general enterprise communications company, and now I'm assuming you're looking at some kind of how you fit into some kind of omnichannel offering. So, from your perspective, let's start with definitions. How do you define omnichannel and where you fit inside of that?
SMS is a very comfortable channel to deal with because it's not something that's used for social interactions and things like that. So if you have something like WhatsApp, it's a little bit like your sitting room at home. It's a space where you engage with your friends and with your family, and on WhatsApp you got your profile picture is typically of your family or your kids or your pets or your favorite hobby or something like that. So someone who talks to you on WhatsApp can see all that information. So you're not particularly private if you're on WhatsApp, and so that's I think why SMS has remained, it's one of the reasons why SMS has remained such a popular channel, because it actually doesn't invade someone's privacy. The social channels like WhatsApp are not always the right place for businesses to engage with clients, but I think if you're dealing with a customer care situation where the client or at least the customer has actually wants to engage the business, then I think channels like WhatsApp and WeChat work extremely well, because then the customer is actually reaching out to the business, and then the business can interact with them. You asked about how like the omni-channel environment had affected us, and I think as a messaging provider, we really need to be able to access all those channels to enable our clients to communicate through those channels, and in different parts of the world different channels are popular. And I guess if you're a supplier like us, you need to identify the regions obviously where you have a lot of clients, and then you've got to adopt the channels that are typically used in that environment. And I think mostly so that you can enable customer care messaging, much less so for notifications and alerts and things like that. I think then SMS remains probably the most appropriate channel.
Could you give some examples of use cases where you're working with companies to put SMS inside that omni-channel experience?
Probably quite a good example is a conveyancer. So when you purchase a property, there's a whole process that takes place in the transfer of the property from the previous owner to yourself. If you bought the property, a conveyancing company would send an SMS or a notification of some sort, probably an SMS, to say, okay, we've reached this step of the process. You need to know, you as the purchaser now need to do this next step. And then the purchaser does that next step, and then a little bit further on down the line, the conveyancer sends another message saying, okay, well, it's now been registered with the deeds office, and it'll now take 6 weeks for the transfer to kind of go through. And I mean, I think one of the great things about SMS is the reason why it's so popular is because it's very short and quick and easy to read. So when someone receives an SMS, they read it immediately. They don't, it's not like email where you actually a little bit nervous to open it, because then you find it's a 6-page manuscript that you've got to work your way through.
In the past few years, there's been a change in the way that enterprises have delivered these SMSs. And one of the things they're doing is incorporating messaging into their wider SaaS platforms that they use to engage their corporate or end user customers. And I know that you guys have done now sort of an official supplier to HubSpot. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that trend for integrating messaging inside SaaS and what that deal meant to you.
So I think there's quite a strong attempt by businesses to be very accessible to their clients, and it's actually quite strange. We've gone from a sort of period of being quite impersonal. I remember in the early days of, like, in the what are they, not the noughts, the 2000 to like 2010, the goal was to try and make it very unattractive for the customer to reach out to the business, and rather encourage the customer to look for the information on the website. But now we seem to have switched around to actually trying to engage with the customer, making it really easy for the customer to engage with us. Well, if you're a business, with the business, and I think that comes because there's a lot of competition, and customers do actually want to talk to their suppliers, the businesses that they do business with, and so there's a whole lot of businesses that have grown up around dealing with the customer interactions, and someone like HubSpot is providing a sort of ticketing system interface where you can have a number of agents that can engage with a number of customers on the go. But then you can also plug in chatbots and things like that, so that sort of fairly basic questions don't actually have to be answered by a human, and then that's obviously a lot cheaper to have an automated reply going back to someone who's asking a question. And in fact, for the customer, it actually might be nicer, instead of having to say, hi, my name's so and so, and the thing that I'm interested in is X, they can just write X on the WhatsApp or the whatever channel they're using to send the message, and the response comes back immediately. Yeah, so we have for our clients, we've worked quite hard to enable them to use several systems, and HubSpot is one of them. But we integrate with Salesforce and Active Campaigns and Active Networks and a number of other systems to enable our clients to talk more easily with their customers on both sending mobile terminated messages and also receiving messages from their customers and dealing with them in a customer care situation.
And how do you see that automation of that sort affecting the evolution of the business messaging business and omnichannel in general?
If you add in bots, and particularly if there's a bit of AI built into it, I think that just makes things much cheaper for a company to be able to manage. If you've got an automated system that's giving your customers relevant information in response to the questions they ask. I mean, it's kind of maybe what we wanted to do in the noughts of the 2000s, when we wanted to be, our customers go and look for the information on the website. We now enable them to effectively go directly to the information on the website without having only asking a single question, or maybe one or two questions. Okay, so it's not on the website; it's via a communication channel. But yeah, I think it enables clients of ours to be much more effective at actually handling their clients' queries, and to do it on a 24-hour-a-day basis. And you don't have to manage call centers.
Okay, so I'm here with Nick Martin. He's the co-founder of Direqt, and we're going to talk about omnichannel. So hi, Nick, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having us.
So it's difficult to think about omnichannel in a customer care sense of a customer making contact with the brand across different channels, and the brand being able to link all those up in the background to make it easier for the customer to get a response. What you're doing is more in the content and marketing realm than customer care realm. So first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about Direqt and what that does, and then talk about what omnichannel means for you.
Yeah, sure. So for context, Direqt is the ad network for business messaging, specifically focused on the RCS channel today. And what we do is we partner with mobile network operators really to help them unlock scale and monetization for the RCS channel. And as you mentioned, the way we do that is by bringing world-class content into the channel for the first time. So Vogue, GQ, et cetera. And what that does is unlock the audience and the inventory that you need to make it a marketing channel and bring marketing dollars into it. And so while we're focused on maybe one messaging channel today, I think as it relates to just a perspective on omnichannel, it's critical, right? And, for us, we think of messaging as this sort of next evolution of content. And I think, that fits neatly with how brands are thinking about omnichannel on the customer care side as well. You need to be where the consumers are, right? If you want to be relevant in 2021, and consumers are in messaging channels. And so for us, we think about bringing both the content and the marketers into the channel as helping them advance their omnichannel strategy.
So if we think that omnichannel is really a lot to do with removing friction from an experience. Yeah. So in a customer care context, it's giving customers the opportunity to maybe make a voice call, have a chat session, and it all seamlessly integrates in the background. In a sense, what you're doing is removing friction as well, because brands typically would do outreach via mobile websites or apps, but it's very difficult for the customer to respond to those without encountering some kind of friction. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, I'll share just a little bit of user behavior on how content is being consumed and shared, and I'll tie that back to how we're removing friction from the process. So today, the average consumer globally spends about 7.5 hours a day consuming content, right? So you sleep for 8 hours, you go to work for 8 hours, the rest of your time is consuming content. And maybe for some of us, a little bit of that is working into the professional hours as well. But the point being, consumers are addicted to content. It's where we want to spend all of our free time. And content is already being shared at scale through in all these different messaging channels. And so the data point is that 84% of all content that's shared today is shared through messaging channels. And that use case is where content is the spark of a conversation. And so I'm on a mobile website, I'm on a social media app, I see a piece of content, I think of a friend, I need to share it with them. I copy the link, I hit the share button, I go send it to my friend. Okay, so that's one example of how content's being engaged across different mediums and platforms today. One of the things we're doing with operators is launching a discovery page. A lot of people call it a chatbot directory. We refer to it as galleries. And what that does is it makes content discoverable inside the default messaging app. And so that allows for that use case to now exist within the default messaging app, as well as it exists, across all these social platforms. So you can be in your messaging app, you can be scrolling through content, see something that makes you think of your friend, you can share it to that friend without having to leave the app. That's part one. The other way that content messaging is already happening is where the conversation is the spark. And so 8 out of 10 millennials and Gen Zers say that they have to leave conversations they're having with friends to go find a piece of content they want to share. So you and I are having a conversation about a topic we're interested in, makes me think of this story I saw. Right now, what the user does is they leave the conversation, they leave the messaging app, they go open a new app, they go find that piece of content, they hit copy, they go back to the messaging app, they go back to the conversation, they send it, right? Relatively cumbersome process, but happening at scale. And by bringing the content into that default messaging app, we remove so much friction from the process, right? Because you and I are having a conversation. I think of that piece of content that I want to share with you. Now I can find it from inside the messaging app. I exit the conversation. I'd make one tap, I grab it, I send it to you. And so, I think broadly, the better job you can do at removing friction from any consumer process, whether that's content consumption or transacting with a business, the more success you're going to have. And we've seen this play out across all different types of verticals over the last 15 years.
How much do brands understand that? How much work do you have to do to persuade brands that messaging is where it's at?
So it's a really good question. I would call back to experience that we had supporting a partner of ours, which is iMyMobile, back in 2018 around AT&T's launch of an RCS chatbot directory with Samsung. And what I could tell you is we were able to go out and get some of the world's most sophisticated digital brands, from Warby Parker to BarkBox to Groupon, to very quickly look at what's happening and decide they wanted to participate. And again, for us, that was because you had that built-in audience from the directory that enabled us to talk to the marketing teams. I would say, again, I'm biased from my perspective, the marketer, the advertiser, it's a pretty quick, they got it. And there's a lot of data to support it, so you don't have to rely on just anecdotes and sort of vision, right? That 53% of consumers say they're more likely to make a purchase from a brand they can message with. There's 7 out of 10 Gen Zers say they're more comfortable texting than talking to people. And so I think most marketers get that. We don't do the customer service thing candidly. And so maybe that's a more difficult conversation. Although I think if you just look at the use cases out there in the environment, it seems to be that the customer service focused, businesses are having tons of success bringing companies into chat as well.
So obviously when you're talking about chat and rich messaging, you're talking about bots because you can't have human behind every one of these sessions. So I know this is something you're heavily involved with. So can you talk a little bit about, again, same sort of question, how well brands understand what they have to do with bots? And secondly, the whole question of bot discovery, and even if you are convinced by the bot proposition and you have one, how do your customers find it?
Yeah, so I'll just talk to the latter first because it's the problem that we're really directly trying to solve. And so as an ad network for business messaging, what we're doing is creating the inventory, the audience to naturally promote a chatbot to. And so what do we mean by that? Well, we have a consumer that's talking to a content chat application or chatbot, as many refer to them as. Well, that's a consumer that already likes engaging with chat applications because they're doing it. They have the capability to do it on their device because they're doing it. So really, really endemic native place to promote a business chatbot to. And today in the market, it doesn't really exist. I think in pockets of the world, Asia comes to mind. There's OTT apps that might support those types of use cases. For the Western markets and with regard to the default text messaging app, that's something that we're partnering with the operator to bring to life for the first time. And so I think it's a little early to be able to speak to, how that's going to resonate as far as the understanding and appreciation of it from a brand. But there's really compelling data that suggests chatbots outperform things like mobile websites by 3 to 4x in terms of conversions, and that they also outperform traditional display advertising by an order of magnitude. And so I think, again, you have to sort of triangulate where chat is having success in the marketing world and then where chat is moving to on the consumer front with respect to the default messaging app to kind of see where the puck is going a bit. But those are the kind of things that I think we're going to have really compelling data on in the next 6 to 12 months for you.
The future of your company is very much fixed around RCS. You've committed to that channel. Tell us about why you believe RCS is the one for the future, and also how the other OTT channels might fit into what you're doing.
With regard to RCS, right, there's a handful of reasons we focus on it first as a channel. One of the main ones being it's based on the user's phone number. And what that means is for both the content publisher and for the brand, the marketer, the advertiser, right, the Coca-Cola, Tesco, whoever it may be, you have the opportunity to actually create a direct relationship with the consumer, right? It's one of the reasons we named our company Direqt. We know that's really powerful, right? Having a one-to-one relationship that you control, that you own, as opposed to, say, renting it, right, across a social platform is incredibly valuable and continues to increase in value today. And so that unique value proposition is something that we want to really take advantage of and capitalize on. And in addition to that, the default messaging app has always had resonance. And again, there's a lot of reasons for that. But again, the statistics suggest that nearly 8 out of 10 millennials, but we think a lot about digital natives here, check their text messages before any other app. And across all generations, that figure is still about 67%. And so for us, it's both the prominence and the value of the default messaging inbox first and foremost, and then the unique value proposition that RCS provides around first-party data and direct relationships that's unique in comparison to an OTT channel. Certainly, we think longer term, there's a ton of opportunities in the OTT landscape, but we focus on sort of where we think the highest value is for our customers and partners today.
Hi everyone, Tim Green back from MEF, and I'm having another conversation about Omnichannel, and this time it's with Sean Whitley, who's the VP of Sales Americas at Mitto. Thanks for joining us, Sean. It's a good job you're here because if you Google Mitto on the web, it comes up as Omnichannel Messaging Solutions, so that makes you the perfect interviewee for this. So let's get to sort of definitions first. You guys seem to be the experts. How do you define Omnichannel?
Well, I mean, the literal translation of omni is all, right? And so we're talking about the ability to engage and communicate with your customers, with your audience through all possible channels. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what channel they're wanting to use or are using. It's about businesses being able to reach them in a consistent way across all of those channels at the same time, in parallel, et cetera.
Okay, so again, looking at your website, next question is going to be about different channels and which ones deliver the best results for different use cases. There's like little icons on your site, and there's 16 channels that you list, and I'm sure we could probably come up with more. So, but what's your advice on the right channels to use?
Well, I mean, first of all, we got to look at what your regional strength of your customer base is, where the demographics lie, because each region does have its own channel where there's a strong market player. A lot of the OTT apps have a stronghold in different regions, so we could slice and dice your strategy that way. But to be honest with you, on a global scale, and from like a recent study that we did, we've seen about 75% of the respondents saying that SMS is by far the best engagement channel. Both marketing teams as well as customer support teams are heavily using omni-channel solutions, and mainly seeing that SMS gets the most engagement. Even if they haven't fully adopted like an advanced omni-channel strategy, they're still seeing that be the leading channel. And then one other thing to note in our studies, that Google business messaging was definitely earmarked by a lot of brands as the one that they're investing in 2022. It has a lot of branding and additional rich content capabilities. So that's kind of the biggest channel today. I would definitely say SMS, because it's also fully encompassing globally on all mobile devices.
How would you describe the most popular channels when it comes to, say, marketers versus customer support teams?
Well, marketers have historically utilized email quite a bit. Obviously, it's done well, and there's different services and data points you can utilize to capture its performance, and obviously you can do rich HTML content and all kinds of things. I think the evolution has been that SMS has really blossomed in that regard as a new channel, because text messaging goes right to their handset. They're holding it, they're on it, they see the notification. Even if they don't fully read the message because they recognize that it's just another marketing promotional message, there's definitely a different type of connection with that consumer than there is through the email, and it's not as buried as it is in other spaces. So marketers are showing us on all of our studies high adoption and high engagement rates as a channel. And then when you switch over to the support side of things, obviously email and voice have been the traditional channels as well. And I feel like I'm beating a dead horse here, but like SMS has definitely evolved as the new channel, because it's an asynchronous conversation. I can be actively on a computer talking to a support rep, but then as soon as I have to go to my son's soccer practice, then it makes it difficult to keep that conversation going in a synchronous way. So by having another channel like SMS, where you can send me a message and then I can respond to it between plays of the game at my own leisure, that's obviously very powerful. So I think that's been a huge evolution. And again, this is where omnichannel kind of kicks in, because we need to make sure that brands are thinking about a consistent way that their messaging is going to consumers. It's the same across all different channels, but at the same time, all of the conversation threads are centralized back into one place, so that a future support agent can see that history, can understand the context, and easily be able to respond to that consumer.
So you talked about the asynchronous dimension of the messaging channel, of SMS in particular. To enable that, you really need bots, you need automation. You can't have a human operator waiting 4 hours for you to come back from football practice, soccer practice, as you Americans say. So, yes. So what part do bots play in that process?
I mean, I think chatbots are very important around automating like message flows and creating greater mechanisms for resolving like support tickets. A lot of lower level typical FAQs, these things can all be resolved. We've actually found in that same study I've quoted a few times already, more than 51% of the respondents are already utilizing it in their marketing use cases using chatbots. even in some support cases as well. But the idea is chatbots aren't meant to like replace humans. It's just augmenting some of the abilities that we don't need to, for lack of a better term, waste the human's time on, right? When you're going through a tricky time with a brand and you're reaching out about a problem with an order or something that's not working right, you're already in like a negative state of mind. And so at least having a person who's actually engaged with you, who's really trying to solve it and communicate in a delightful way in a bad scenario, will at least shift your state of mind to a more neutral point. So that way the experience overall becomes more pleasant. I mean, I don't have the statistics, but NPS scores, CSAT scores, all are significantly increased when a successful omni-channel strategy is in place.
Everything you said about omnichannel, about the choice that it gives customers, the speeded up experience, the asynchronous nature of it, it all sounds really compelling. So how well penetrated is it with enterprises? What's the adoption like? Is there still a huge addressable market out there?
Oh, it's absolutely a huge market that hasn't been addressed. I definitely think that it's only about 20-25% range today. At least the respondents on our survey, it was low like that. Overall sentiment, and when I'm talking to brands and I'm discussing this, they're all talking about doing it. They're all starting to build out and look at what that could be like, what technologies are out there, and how do they unify their overall omni-channel strategy. But not a lot have actually made that leap forward and started to implement it. So I definitely would say it's in the 20 percentile range today.
Okay, so final question then, the obvious one is, what are their objections and what are the obstacles, and how do you sway those enterprises to take the leap?
I think the biggest challenge with adopting omni-channel strategy is really comes down to ownership of that strategy. There's so many different groups that are being impacted by communications and engagement, from the marketing team, from support team, which we've already talked about, but then there's also potentially product and sales. There's a lot of teams that are impacted as a result of the effectiveness of that omni-channel strategy. So at the end of the day, like, I think assigning ownership to some senior leader who fully understands the customer and ultimately at the end of the day, like, cares about the experience, the benefits that a mature omni-channel strategy will have, creating that cohesive journey, that is what it's going to take to overcome it. And I'll tell you, the other thing is a lot of brands worry about adopting so many different channels. So I can understand a brand's hesitation where it's unfamiliar to them, that they may need to find somebody who fully understands WhatsApp or fully is involved and utilizes Viber, and then can be the champion within understanding how to use those strategies specifically for that channel. But how does that play out into the ownership of a senior leader who understands the overall strategy for the company? So that's, I think, been the biggest challenge today. It's something so new, and you need somebody to take ownership of that.
Hi everyone, I'm here with Eileen Carroll. She's the Managing Director of Puca in Ireland, and we're here to talk about omnichannel. So thanks for joining us, Eileen.
Hi Tim, thanks for having me.
You guys have been in the SMS business for a long time, and obviously you've broadened out your offering long since then into other areas of a complete communications company. Fundamental question: how do you see omnichannel? How do you define it?
Well, I guess omnichannel may mean different things to different people, but what it means to me is building your technology stack in a way that you're making your business open to people through their chosen communication channels. So it's really all about accessibility and convenience for customers. So I don't necessarily see it as just marketing. Maybe that's because we're more of a business messaging specialist. I see it more as a way to engage and have that single view of the customer.
Messaging's become very important to enterprises. From your point of view, what do they look for in a messaging solution?
Well, I think what messaging really means is not a batch and blast. It's not about batch and blast anymore. It's not just about sending notifications or alerts to customers. It's far more than that. It's underlining the sense of trust that consumers have with the businesses they're choosing to deal with. And so not only, I guess there's three areas where it really comes to the fore. It's about efficiency, so it's saving costs, obviously, versus post and other ways of communicating. It reduces impact on the contact center. So it's really good in terms of cost saving. It's also about convenience for the customer as well, and efficiency and trust. So those three aspects are, I think, what businesses gain from using messaging as part of their communications mix.
From your enterprise customers' point of view, what does a good omnichannel experience look like? Clearly, it's one where they're switching across the many different channels that are available now, but I suppose the point about omnichannels, it makes that process seamless. So could you describe what that looks like?
Well, what it looks like to customers is, I guess, the tools being intelligent enough to switch over to the relevant channel depending on the customer's preferences. So the way we do it is we provide integrations to ERP providers or CRM providers. You know, it could be an industry specific ERP or the likes of Microsoft Dynamics or Adobe Campaign. And so those consoles would be driving the intelligence behind the communications. Puca acts as a conduit primarily for the SMS. We also build customer care apps, which are very omnichannel by their nature. But yeah, I think what success looks like is an experience that's not complicated to the agent. It's an experience where they're not scrambling to find what they need, and the customer preferences are always in sync and always kept up to date.
So could you give me an example of an enterprise you've worked with where they've integrated this kind of omni-channel messaging into these SaaS platforms and how that might work for them?
We have done it for Permanent TSB, who are one of the larger banks here in Ireland. So Permanent TSB use Adobe Campaign, and several years ago approached us to carry the SMS element of the communication. They really needed a specialist in SMS. I guess there are quite a few platforms out there that purport to have all the channels, but in reality, what's happening under the hood is they're using APIs to integrate with third parties in a lot of cases, and those third parties need to be specialists like Puca. So yeah, Permanent TSB would be a great example. We also work with their fraud department, and we do quite a lot with them. Their agents actually use the Puca console to be able to message customers who have a suspicious transaction on their account. But as well as those manual communications, there's also an automated element. So their TSIS platform sends robotic notifications. So I guess robotic process automation is a big thing for the banks at the moment, especially around fraud, because they need to be able to react in real time.
So picking up on that automation theme, what about bots? Clearly, when you're looking after customers, you can't have human agents handling every single interaction, so bots come into play there. So what's your thinking on where bots are at now and where they might go in the future?
Well, bots is such an interesting area. I think it's just fantastic to take away the very repetitive element of communication, and to give the customer a sense that they're immediately connecting to the organization. I think customers are wise enough in most cases to know that they're talking to a bot. I don't think they really care. It's the convenience of it. And I guess as AI comes along, and it's amazing what has happened in this space in recent years, as AI comes along, I think chatbots are going to be even more pervasive going forward. And I think it's interesting as well, again, coming back to accessibility, that it's not just bots that are making businesses more immediately accessible, but even with IVR, developments like AI, voice assistants, Alexa, and so forth, that area is going to absolutely explode. I think we all know that. So if you can imagine, for people who use assistive technologies, they could be blind, for example. So voice assistants are absolutely essential. And again, the hard of hearing, it's another group who really benefit from having a choice of technologies to engage with. And that's where SMS actually really comes into its own. For example, we provide an SMS integration to the emergency services here in Ireland through BT Ireland. And that was originally devised as a way for the hard of hearing to be able to access emergency services, that they would have to pre-register. And this was part of an EU-wide initiative around accessibility. So I think when we're thinking about customers, we need to think of people of all abilities and a whole range of abilities, and try not to exclude people. That needs to be a real priority. It's not always about developing flashy websites. I think sometimes people just want simple access to the services that they're using and real-time information through their chosen channel.
Obviously, where bots can really come into their own is when they're embedded in a rich messaging conversation, and they can start exchanging rich media files and so on. From your point of view, with your work with your many clients, do you see rich messaging as part of this omnichannel mix, or is it something that we're talking about which is coming soon?
I think what's really interesting about RCS, and I think I've been blogging about this for a few years now, is the fact that it's taking an app experience and bringing it to messaging. So just imagine being able to communicate with your utility provider of choice and being able to pay them immediately through the messaging channel, but for that to include a lot more rich information about the service that you're purchasing. RCS has been on the horizon for a good while, and I know it's happening, but I guess it needs to be happening in a more universal way for us to be able to provide it to customers. We're not quite there yet.
Okay, so finally, you, as you said, you've been in the business for 20 years. You've gone from SMS to providing a much more wide range of enterprise communications tools, and you've talked about SaaS and integration and so on. How has this changed the monetization options for a company like Puca?
But we've really tried to specialize over the years. I guess we went through a phase of really broadening out our offering. We were doing anything and everything. But as the industry evolves, you're now having SaaS providers who are very much specialists in their area, and that's where we sit. So we specialize in SMS, and we specialize in customer care apps, which have messaging and push notification built in, obviously, and email also. So yeah, I think we're in a good place now, and I think we've really settled into our SaaS business model, and that's obviously the way to go.
Hi everyone, Tim Green from the MEF, back again to talk about Omnichannel. I'm here with Hugo Marçal. He's the GM for Sendit, which is part of Go4Mobility. So Hugo, thanks for joining us. You guys are a Portuguese company. I think you have operations across Africa as well. So what does Omnichannel mean for you guys?
Well, we shared a vision that Omnichannel is an integration and a cooperation of distinct channels that, in fact, organizations use to interact with their consumers. And this ultimately it has the goal to provide a better consumer experience overall and a consistent experience of each brand across the distinct channels they use to sell their products. We at Sendit, we have global coverage. And we see that the markets are adapting themselves to these needs. And some numbers say or state that the omni-channel marketing is crucial for the development of their business. And this not only applies to the Portuguese market or the European market as well, but also across distinct countries like in Africa.
Where does business messaging, or more precisely SMS, fit into the omni-channel experience?
Well, the SMS, of course, is one of those distinct channels used to provide this omni-channel experience, and it is very important because it's interoperable. So it will reach any kind of device instantly, and provides a direct interaction for the user. But the omni-channel is much more than that. It's the collaboration of all these distinct channels across a brand experience. So the SMS, of course, is very important for us because it was the way we used to start our business and to grow, and we see that it will continue to play an important role in this omni-channel experience in the future. But also we look to another distinct channels as well. Of course, the email, which is widely used, but also rich messaging like RCS, WhatsApp for Business, as well as a way to promote this omnichannel experience and to have customers more engaged with it.
From your perspective, how many of your customers are just doing old-fashioned business messaging, and how many of them have really embraced this omnichannel approach?
Especially big brands, big big enterprises are moving towards an omnichannel presence in the market because they understand that they are losing customers because of the lack of that option. So when we look at brick and mortar stores, but also when we look to e-commerce websites, these brands will try to always promote the brands in the same way. So we are seeing that brands, especially mid and large corporations, are moving towards adoption of platforms that provide them an omnichannel strategy. We are moving from that simple bulk way to send, for instance, SMS or emails, moving to a perspective where a brand is well informed and take the business decisions based on insights and all the information that a platform like we provide or we aim to provide can give to them.
Are these companies using omnichannel for marketing or for customer care or for both?
Yeah, for both. And we also agree that they should use it for both because it's not only the process related to promote products or special offers. Let's say, for instance, we are reaching a Black Friday right now, so this is not for the marketing purpose, but also for a transactional purpose of customer interaction, and customer interaction will play a decisive role in this approach because ultimately consumers will look for brands that provide them the best personalized experience they can get. So like I said before, if I'm a customer who prefers to interact with a brand using SMS and another buyer from the same brand will prefer to do it by WhatsApp, if a brand consistently makes it available to all the customers, it will play definitely an important role in the buyer decision process.
So if you have a customer that is currently doing batch and send SMS, and they want to change over to a different approach using omnichannels and APIs and CPaaS and those kinds of things, how fast can they change, and what sort of technical knowledge do they need to do that?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, because an omnichannel strategy will ask for more investment, more content, more presence online, and but we see this as an investment that will have its return in appropriate time, because it will ultimately give them more customers and more loyal customers as well. So we, as an agent or a solutions provider, we always try to do one thing, which is to provide platforms that will help our decision makers take better business decisions. So if a platform can predefine a marketing campaign or give enough insights for what should be communicated in what time, what type of content, this will be steps that will reduce all the efforts in the adoption of an omnichannel strategy.
How big is the opportunity for Sendit, for GoFundMobility? How many, what proportion of your customers are using omnichannel, and how big is the addressable market?
Yes, today it's only a small portion of it, but we, as we say, we provide a type of selling which is consultative selling. So part of our sales process is consultative. So we try to be near to all the brands, to advise them and to explain to them how they should interact with their customers. Not only import a bunch of contacts to our platform and send a bulk campaign, but be more specialized, target more what they want to communicate in, and the segment all the audience they have. And those steps will definitely contribute to be a brand that communicates better and sends the right content at the right time to the right customers as well.
So when you move from sending bulk messages to omnichannel, then you invite new patterns of interaction, so you can have two-way conversations with your customers, and obviously you can have conversations with them across different channels. So how does that change the business model, and how does that change the way that you charge fees for your customers?
The communication channel used in the omnichannel strategy is ultimately a way to get to an end. So to a brand, we are moving from a process of selling SMSs based on volumes and things like that, to moving forward to sell information. In fact, sell insight, sell capability of making those kind of decisions.
Okay, so I'm here with Stefan Alaru, and he's the CEO of SMS Highway, and we're going to have a conversation about omnichannel. So you guys have built up an SMS business from scratch. So why don't you talk about the power of SMS and where it fits inside an omnichannel experience?
Well, I think any junior sales would start a presentation about SMS application to person with the idea that SMS is probably the most personal communication tool one has at its disposal. Any SMS is, or most SMSs are read within the first 2 minutes of being delivered, and by over 90% of the subscribers. So I think the power of it shows how much power it has to to deliver the communication, the message itself. It's still ubiquitous, so it's present in every single device, in the mobile device in the world. So it has the power to virtually reach anyone.
So can you talk about some of the work that you've done with enterprises, omnichannel sort of work, and how SMS fits inside that experience?
So as part of the omnichannel environment, I think, of course, any enterprise would try to deliver the message first of all in the most cost-effective way. So they would first try to use email, and then when email fails or there's no feedback, then they will try to use a push message on an app, if that is present on the subscriber phone. And then of course they will have to fall back on SMS, and that happens more often than they would want to. And at one point they will probably try to also initiate a voice call, but that is too personal in some instances. So the user doesn't really like to be called. So the SMS probably still remains the most effective way to deliver the enterprise message.
Thanks. So you've just talked about email and voice, push messaging being channels that an enterprise can use before possibly that they might deflect back to SMS. But with an omni-channel experience, that those channels are linked in the background, so that you try your email, and if it doesn't work, you have the same system in the background that's rerouting people to SMS. So is that something that you're seeing a lot of in your market?
Yes, absolutely. So the client, the enterprise, has at its disposal a wide variety of channels and way to arrange these channels in the most effective way they might consider. And of course, they also have the OTT part at their disposal, like WhatsApp or RCS. And the way all these options are arranged, it's entirely at the choice of the customer. In some markets, there are still quality problems because the operators are not working together to deliver the message properly. And you have various scenarios where you have roaming, or you have portability, or even national roaming, and the message just doesn't get delivered.
And how important is cost as a factor? It's very cheap to send hundreds of thousands of emails. It's more expensive to do that by SMS. So is this a barrier when you're trying to sell SMS services to enterprises?
When it's being used as a marketing tool, it certainly is a barrier. Because as you may be aware, the revenues of the operators are being eroded by the OTT players in the market. So people are no longer using voice calls, prefer to use a WhatsApp call or a Viber call, and then they no longer use SMS because they have it for free from the OTT players. So they need to recover this revenue somehow. And the way they recover it is mostly by using SMS or voice. So they ring fence it. They use various monetizations or filtering services, and the price of the SMS goes up and goes up and continues to go up to absolutely significant levels. And when it comes to the marketing people, this is certainly a problem because they have a budget. When it comes to the critical communications, there are no other options.
What part do bots play in your business?
For sure, it's possible to implement automation within the SMS communication. Actually, the engine behind is not very much different from whatever is being used now on the RCS or on WhatsApp channels. It's just that the traction you get now from the very huge players such as, well, Facebook, the owner of WhatsApp, or Google, is huge. So then you have a huge group of developers that are only concentrating on the OTT RCS OTT part. But for sure, automation on the SMS bidirectional channels has always been there. Just that you don't have the option to add the value, add more rich content, such as you link it with some maps, or you link it with some Google searches or anything like that.
Thinking about the regions that you're targeting in Latin America and Africa in particular, where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth in A2P and in SMS messaging?
From our point of view, for example, in Africa, there is still a huge growth opportunity when it comes to pure SMS messaging, omnichannel as well. But because of the smartphone penetration being still growing, and as well the coverage itself of the mobile networks is still quite low in many countries, then there's still a lot of potential of growing the business in this region just by using pure SMS. People are very eager to communicate, just that they're unable to do it. They're completely unable to do it. So whenever the coverage increases, then you get a lot of new targets coming into your databases or your able to reach.